Hey guys, welcome back to week 9. We're talking about depth and shallow this week. That'll start leading us into where we're going in a few weeks, which is more about the signs of growth and signs of just, important like events and things like that. We're gonna just shift from the seasons of growth and the seasons of becoming aware, and we'll move into signs. And I like depth and shallow because it's so prevalent in nature. When we are thinking about water, for example, I used to always tell my students when they were writing that you want to try to have depth in your writing. And I used to tell them, I don't want 3-foot pools of analysis. I want one 8-foot pool that you can really dive into. And I think people are like that, where, some people are really kind of surface level and shallow, and then other people have really a great ability to go dig deeper and have more depth to them, and in their emotions and their personality. So I want to start talking a little bit about this idea of the self and sort of emotional complexity versus emotional shallowness. So with emotional complexity and emotional depth, we can feel things, we can understand things, we can dissect things about our emotions. So a shallow kind of emotional feeler is going to say something like, I'm angry, or I'm mad, right? I'm mad or I'm angry. And that shows a level of not really knowing your emotional self, because an anger is always a secondary emotion, right? That's what psychology tells us. And so there's always a root to your anger. There's always a root to dig a little deeper to find. So maybe you were embarrassed, or maybe you were frustrated, or maybe you were disrespected, right? That would lead us to being angry. We might manifest anger, but we're actually feeling hurt or frustration or disrespected or whatever we're feeling. So the idea of emotional depth or emotional complexity is that we can really kind of parse why we're feeling, how we're feeling, what we're feeling, etc. And I was no good at this until very recently. I was someone who, and by very recently, I mean within the last 2 years, very, very recent, which is why I get it now, right? So I was somebody who always had to, or always felt like I had to kind of just keep going. If I had a hurt or an embarrassment or a shame or a guilt, I kind of just felt like I had to keep going and not pay any attention to that thing that hurt me, because I just kind of compartmentalized it and thought, I need to function. And I would throw myself into my work, which wasn't actually the healthiest way to go about anything, because I didn't sit in my emotions. I didn't experience my emotions. I journaled them and then I moved on. And I didn't actually deal with anything for a very long time. So then when I was going to therapy in 2018 and 2019, and I was in such a place where my therapist was like, here, and she gave me a sheet, and the sheet said a whole bunch of feelings on it. It was like, in like little faces and feelings, like, are you hurt, are you worried, are you anxious, are you embarrassed, are you ashamed, are you this, are you that? And I looked at it and I was like, we don't teach this. Like, we don't talk about this. It's really, in our culture, it's a prevalent thing to just be like, oh, I'm gonna man up and shoulder on and just go. We don't really talk about our emotions. It doesn't ever really seem like the stronger thing to do, to talk about your emotions, or say like, listen, I feel upset, or I feel hurt, or I feel scared about this thing. And it's partially because there's not a culture to do that, and it's also because we're distracted a lot, and we don't want to get in touch with our emotional self like that. So there was a whole little Michelina in there that I didn't even know, and took some time to find and learn about. And I like her. I like her a lot. You know, she's not perfect, but I'm a fan of her. So that is something I would encourage everyone to kind of do, is like, what are your triggers, right? That brings us to emotional depth. Thomas, when we first started dating, would always be like, oh, are you mad? I'm like, no, I'm not angry. I am disappointed, or I'm frustrated. And he couldn't always see that like distinction between, like, he just umbrella blanketed everything under mad. And I think a lot of us do this, where we umbrella everything under one emotion. So, you know, we don't always use, I guess, the sophisticated language to be like, oh, I'm shocked, or I'm worried, or I'm uncomfortable, or I'm feeling belittled, or I'm feeling ridiculed, or I'm feeling ashamed, or I'm feeling guilty, right? We don't use that verbiage. We're just like, oh, I'm upset. Or I would do that, like, oh, I'm upset. Well, that doesn't tell you anything. Like, why are you upset? How are you upset? What happened? What are you feeling? Like, why are you feeling it? We don't do that. We don't press into those emotions because they're uncomfortable. So emotional depth really comes when we start to kind of get uncomfortable with that discomfort. Get comfortable with that discomfort. We want to greet it like a friend. Like, okay, I've been doing this a lot. Like, okay, I'm upset. Why am I upset? What am I upset about? How can I go to not being upset? You know, emotions only last like 20 seconds. So anytime an emotion lasts longer than 20 seconds, it's because we're feeding it. And again, that's psychology. That's not me. That's other research. So you want to always ask yourself, why? Why am I feeling this way? When we have emotional depth, we have a better handle on having a healthy relationship with our emotions. So that's one, right? Emotional depth. I will always say, I have always said, I will always say, I think there are multiple ways a person grows, right? I said this in the first discussion. Physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, I guess, spiritually, at least 4. Those are my favorite. And, you know, we can have that depth of person in pretty much every way except maybe physical. Physical, you just kind of grow, like you just kind of are, right? So physical is like the least developmental way of things. But emotionally, you can process your emotions in a complex, deep sort of way, or you can kind of keep them in a shallow sort of way. Like when you're a child, when you think like a child, you feel like a child, you kind of process like a child. And as you get older and you become more aware, you want to, you know, start processing like an adult, whatever that looks like. And I've always said that I've known 50-year-olds who act like they're 15, and I've known 15-year-olds who act like they're 50, and everything in between. Because a physical age is not always indicative, although sometimes it is, but it's not always indicative of an emotional or an intellectual age. For a long time, I always said I'm like 25. Now I'm not 25 anymore, but when I was 25, I started kind of processing this idea of mine. And I said, you know, I'm 25 physically, and I'm probably like 90 intellectually, and I'm probably like 150 spiritually, and I'm probably like a 12 emotionally, right? And then I really got to know myself, and I was like, okay, I'm giving myself way too much credit. I'm like 28 physically, and I'm like 15 emotionally, and maybe 7 emotionally, because I didn't process some of my traumas that I had as a kid. And we all have traumas as a kid. No one escapes that. And then intellectually, I'm like, I'm not nearly as smart as I think I am. Now that I'm going for my doctorate, I'm like, wow, I don't know anything. So I'm like, I'm probably 45 maybe intellectually. And I thought I had a really deep spiritual relationship with God, and I found out I don't. I literally, after everything that happened, I was like, I know so little about the nature of God. So I thought I had a hugely like deep, complex spiritual relationship with him. And I actually was like a 12 on that too, you know? So you can always go in deeper. And I don't mean that in like a sexual kind of way. I'm not trying to be like facetious here. But like spiritually, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, you can always go deeper. You can always break it down more. Kids do this really well when they continually ask why. And it's like, oh, well, let's get ready for bed. And the kid's like, why? It's like, because it's time to sleep. And the kid's like, why? And it's like, because it's nighttime. It's like, well, why? You know, like you can always dig a little deeper. Princess and the Frog actually has a song where it's like, dig a little deeper, you gotta find out who you are. And that's really true. Like, we have to dig deeper to find out who we are. And who we are is always changing. And we're always coming from a side of nature and a side of nurture. And so we really are very complex people. And we don't give ourselves any time to sit in our complexities. And every one of us has like a really unique, interesting, different perspective and background and history and story. And we just kind of like override it. We don't think much about it because we are so busy focusing on everybody else. And I think that's kind of a sadness that we do that. Because we feel like we're not as interesting as other people, or we don't have it as bad or as good as other people. And our focus a lot of times, and I've talked about this before, is outward. And it really, really has to start with being like inward focus. We have to kind of focus on who we are and why we kind of are the way we are, to really get out of that sort of green spring childlike mentality into coming into the summer and the fall of who we are. Because like nature, there is always growth to be had, and everything goes through cycles. So when you think you've got yourself figured out, something happens and you change, and then you have to refigure yourself out. So it's a never-ending cyclical process of figuring yourself out, emotionally and intellectually. So covered emotional depth in like a pretty, I think, fair way, right? Ask yourself why you're feeling this way. Ask yourself how you got to feel this way. Ask yourself why these things bother you, as far as emotions are concerned. Intellectual depth. I think that a lot of times, I think it was Albert Einstein who said, if you measure like a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to look very stupid. Right? I'm paraphrasing, that's not quoted verbatim by any means. But what happens is we have to play to our strengths. And I don't think that we live in a society that allows us to do that. So we have to kind of figure out our intellectual capacities and dig into those in order to grow intellectually, right? So we all grow physically. It's a given. I mean, if we're here, we're growing linear. We can grow emotionally, but we can also be very shallow and stunted in our growth when we don't process our traumas. And intellectually, yes, we all go through school. That's true. But school's just a tool. Like, if you're not actually interested in what you're learning, you're not growing intellectually. You need to kind of take your education and grab it by the horns. And just because you understand something doesn't mean that's what you want to press into. So, do you like art? Do you like music? Do you like cars? Do you like history? Do you like English? Do you like French? Do you like math? Do you like science? The thing that's nice about school is that it kind of gives you an overview of what you might be good at, what you might like. I think so many people are like bored and restless and distracted by things because they don't dig into what they like. I'm going to use Thomas as an example. He's good at a lot of things. He's very smart, very capable, very good at a lot of things. He's very good at math. He's very good at finances. But up until he just started his own business in finance, he didn't do anything with finance, and he wasn't happy. He was good at what he was doing, and it was fine, but he wasn't challenged. He wasn't intellectually stimulated. He wasn't digging deeper intellectually. So now, as he spends his days crunching numbers and doing all these things that he's a fan of, that I don't understand at all, because that's not my strength, he's like really intellectually engaged and just so interested in what he's doing. And he's like, is it always like this? as for someone who's an academic and who's always found herself intellectually engaged, I'm like, yeah, like it's fun when you press into what you like. It's not fun when you have to press into things you don't like, which is why I think it's such a huge detriment to people when they're stuck in a job where they're not actually playing to their strengths. I told my students when I was teaching them that I don't care if you're an A student and I don't care if you're a D student. Just get through my class. Because not everybody's going to be good at English. Not everybody's going to care about English. But just get through my class. You know, you got to meet people where they're at. Well, you have to meet yourself where you're at. Just because your parents say you should be a medical doctor, if you want to be like a chemist, what are you doing in medicine? Get yourself over to chemistry, right? And we don't allow ourselves that intellectual growth either. We don't allow ourselves to dig deeper into our intellect because we're so busy doing what everybody else tells us to do, or what makes the money, or what we're comfortable with. Oh God, comfort keeps us at level shallow. It doesn't, uncomfortable, discomfort brings us into deeper levels. And we don't like to be uncomfortable. Therefore, we don't dig deeper a lot of times. And so your intellectual growth can really be stymied by trying to be the status quo or trying to go where the money is. If you're somebody who likes, you know, I don't know, hedge funds and being a CEO and all those things, like great, you know, cool, awesome. There's plenty of people who, or you really want to be called to be a medical doctor, hey, great, make the money, go to school, do your thing. But we do, in order to get that depth, that level of depth, that growth, we need to press into where we're intellectually fed and intellectually led, and we need to dig into that. So, and that's different for everybody, you know. I think eventually I'm going to start offering one-on-one sessions, potentially. So to kind of like give people the opportunity to flesh that out. Like, what do I like about myself? I love asking questions and I love learning about people. So, not in a therapist type of way, in a like guiding kind of way. And so, you know, sometimes we can't do this on our own. And so it's like, well, great, you're telling me, and that's awesome, but I don't know how to do this for myself. And learning is the first step, and then applying is the second step, right? And a lot of times you learn more when you apply and do it yourself. So that's, again, in the plans for the future. We're not there yet. But for now, so physical growth happens. Emotional growth, you have to do actively. And you have to question yourself or have someone question you or have those conversations with yourself. And intellectual growth, you have to have those conversations, or depth. I don't want to say growth, I want to say depth, digging deeper, going, like, really going in, about what it is that you like and how you can do more of it. Depth happens with discomfort, as I said before, but also depth happens when we ask ourselves why and how. Why do I like this? How can I do more of it? Why am I like this? How can I change? You know, like, and I used to always tell my students when we were writing, which, you know, kids don't like to write analytically. I would tell them, I don't need the what, the who, the when. I read the book too. I know the text. I need the why and the how. I need you to prove your point by telling me the why and the how. Here's your point, prove it, right? I don't need you to sum up the book. I read the book. I don't need you to sum up what you did. I need you to figure out why you did it, right? It's like, I'm sorry that I didn't do the dishes. I see that you didn't do it, and I'm glad you're sorry, but why didn't you do it? Why didn't you carry them? You know what I mean? I don't want to get deep into dishes because it's just an example. But too often, and I say this to Tom all the time, and he gets so annoyed, but it is worth considering. So often when we fight with people, we only explore the surface level of the interaction, and we don't get to the root of the issue. And so it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example of me and Thomas fighting. And he was, you know, if he gets angry about something, I'm like, okay, I understand that you're angry, but why are you angry? And he's like, I don't know why I'm angry. And I'm like, well, think about it. I'm gonna walk away. You think about why you're upset and let me know, because I don't want to do it again. I'm not trying to upset you, right? And so that level of depth and communication has really helped us to grow, as much as he, hates when I do it. But it is worth that growth, I think. Again, all of these tips, tricks, discussions, it's just about growing yourself. And nobody can do that for you, right? I can tell you about it. I can tell you about my process. I can talk about, how I came to some of these life-changing growth things, but it doesn't matter if you don't do it. So if you are somebody who feels like you can go deeper within yourself, intellectually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, then I hope this helps. And if you feel like you're as deep as you can possibly go, my guess is you can go deeper, because we're always changing, and just when you think you know yourself, you change. It's a wild thing. So hope that you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you like what you're hearing, and I'll see you here next week.